Welcome to Wisdom for the Wilderness, a podcast of Overland Church, where the pastors of Overland Church will answer your biblical and theological questions and confront current issues from a biblical perspective. We'll also celebrate stories of how God is moving and working among the people of Overland Church. And so welcome. The idea behind this podcast is that we live in the wilderness. We live in a fallen and broken world. Yet we're waiting the return of Christ. And so during this sojourn, this pilgrimage that we're on, we want to bring biblical wisdom to it. And so today we want to talk about an issue that I think is a really important issue for our time.
Very important.
And there's a bit of purpose in the timing of why we're going to talk about this issue as well. And so today we really want to kind of talk about the smartphone.
Yeah. So, it's Christmas time and a lot of parents are getting gifts, and they're probably, a lot of kids are going to have some form of tech, whether a smartphone, gaming system, or something on Christmas morning. And we need to talk about, as Christians, as parents, what do we think about this and how do we handle this?
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to ask a question, and it's meant to be a bit provocative.
Okay.
But how would you feel about getting your kid a gun for this Christmas? And a gun, let's just say it's a high caliber gun and you're giving them lots of bullets. How does that make you feel as a parent?
Well, first, it depends what age my kid is, right?
Yeah.
And how responsible that kid is, the maturity, not just the age, but the maturity level.
Yeah.
And then I know that if I'm giving them something like that, then there's a lot of instruction and oversight that's going to come with giving them. You and I grew up hunting.
Oh, yeah.
We had guns. I got guns for Christmas.
Yeah, my kids get guns for their birthdays sometimes.
So we're not anti-gun.
Oh, no.
But it's a dangerous weapon, and you have to be smart and you have to be trained how to use it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those guns in my house stay locked up in a safe.
That's
and
right.
There's a ton of safety behind it, and they actually don't have access to it. So when I say that, I think in a lot of parents, maybe that it would evoke emotion of, oh, I would give them a gun, or maybe I wouldn't give them a gun.
Yeah.
I want you to know something. Smartphone is as dangerous as something like a gun.
Yeah.
It is a tool that puts the world at our fingertips. And so there's some levity coming with this conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think another comparison that's been made, it's not new with me, is with cigarettes. Okay. So there was a time way before our time, actually, that people thought cigarettes were good for young people.
Yeah.
That this was healthy, that it was calming, that it practiced your breathing, exercised your lungs. There was all these things, all these benefits to smoking, and companies marketed their product towards kids and teens. And then in the 80s especially is when it came out that these companies knew the entire time that their product was incredibly dangerous and harmful, and yet they were pushing it towards these, young people for addiction purposes to make money. And that's exactly the same thing that has happened with Facebook and Instagram and all of these things that are coming to your kids through smartphones.
Right. Even though at this point, we know the danger, we know the addiction,
Yes.
we know all the baggage that can come with it, but yet it's still being pushed and still being marketed to our kids.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the most dangerous things in our home is the smartphone. So, man, let's dive in real quick, and just pastorally, I want you to hear my heart, Josh's heart here, because I realize there are people in our church who have given their kids smartphones. There's some who are going to listen to this podcast and are going to give their kids smartphones anyway. Every parent in our church is going to make different parenting decisions. You and I have made different parenting decisions. I think that'll come out in this conversation. So pastorally, I don't want you to hear me going, "Hey, I'm coming hard after you." I want you to walk with wisdom. I want you to exercise wisdom here. and even would push to go, okay, I think there's some steps that some of us in our church would need to take who have given our kids smartphones that maybe need to consider backing up and changing course.
Right. Yeah. There's principles that I think we should all agree on. There's certain things that maybe we as parents, as Christian parents, should all agree on, but some of the details of when and how, the hours, that they have access, those things are going to be unique to each family. But we've got to take that wisdom and because the world around us and our kids, especially who want these things because their friends have these things, are just, leaving it out there for anything to happen. Yeah. And we have to be smarter than that. And I think there is a level of needing to shock ourselves into understanding how dangerous this is, like we just did in the intro. Yeah. Because the world is not going to put this out there as well as we are with different types of goals as Christian parents.
Right. I think we should probably, because we're making this claim that the smartphone's very dangerous, I think let's just dive into some of the facts, some of the numbers. I think there's a lot of research out there. Matter of fact, every bit of research that I've ever seen says that they're bad for teenagers.
Right.
There's not a study out there that goes, oh, it's actually a really good idea to give your kid a smartphone. Right. There's not a single study out there that shows that. But let's dive into some stuff. And I know there's a book that came out this year, I believe.
Yeah, this summer.
Jennifer, my wife, read it, and we had conversations. I did not read it, but I read a summary of it.
Yeah.
And you're reading it.
Yes.
And the book is The Anxious Generation.
By Jonathan Haidt.
Who's
not a Christian that I know of, but is a sociologist or psychologist, and has just gathered all the data to see how has smartphones being in existence for over 10 years now, how has that affected our kids?
Yeah. The subtitle of the book is How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness.
Yeah.
So there's something right there. He uses the word mental illness. Mm-hmm. And in our culture, in our time, we hear about mental illness all the time.
Right.
And when we were growing up, we're in our 40s. Are you 40 yet?
Not yet. So
okay.
I'm in my 40s. A little bit. I'm 38.
38. And growing up, we didn't hear a lot about mental illness.
No.
We didn't hear a lot about teenagers with depression or anxiety. Now, I'm sure that there were teenagers that had depression and anxiety. I don't think that's only come to being because of the smartphone. But there has been an incredible rise in it.
Matter of fact, the thing that tracks that the best is the increase in suicide and suicide attempts, right? I mean, maybe growing up in high school, there might have been like one person that it was rumored attempted suicide.
Right.
But you just never heard of it. And now it's just like every kid you talk to thinks their life isn't worth living.
Right. This is from the book, The Anxious Generation. The data reveals a staggering 145% increase in reported cases of depression, depressive episodes among girls since 2012. For boys, the rise is even more pronounced, with a 161% increase in reported cases of depression episodes over the same period. The impact extends beyond self-reported symptoms, with college students receiving a 134% increase in anxiety, a 106% increase in depression, a 72% increase in ADHD, and a 57% increase in bipolar disorder diagnosis since 2012.
Yeah.
So
that's staggering. That just should take your breath away.
Right. Of all of the sudden, something has entered into our world that has changed life for our young people. I think we can begin to ask the question of why.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. So, the adolescent brain is just like developing completely during that time period, and And it is meant to be developed socially in the real world. But what we've done is we have created a virtual world that a lot of parents thought is going to be just a substitute, like an extension of the real world. But what it did was it created a false world that kept students from developing properly in their adolescence. And so now we have Gen Z college students. We talk about this as a staff. The guys won't ask the girls out.
Right.
Like that's a sign of
Right.
having lived in this virtual world, especially with pornography in terms
Oh,
of
yeah.
their love life, where they don't have the drive, the biological drive
Right.
to take a chance and ask a girl out because they're
Yeah.
they've satisfied all those desires and numbed all those desires through this device.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You can control to some degree your level of rejection online.
Right.
You can, even when we think about dating apps and what it's done, it's going to match you to the person so closely that it lowers your percentage of being rejected.
Right.
And man, I'll just tell you, I think that's a shame. Like learning to take failure, learning to take being rejected, like it's a huge thing. And so it's one of the things that it's lowered the bar on. Relationally, it's lowered the bar in such a way that we don't know how to communicate with each other.
It's kind of Haidt talks about this. It operates differently for boys and for girls. So for girls, it has amplified the snarkiness, the drama, because they can hide behind the machine, and there are things they would never say to one another in person, face to face.
Absolutely. That
But they
boys will
will
say
type
online.
it on Instagram. And then add to that the fact that they're scrolling through Instagram or TikTok and they're seeing these people that are computer generated or computer perfected. And so suddenly girls are suffering from incredible depression and anxiety and suicide because they're comparing themselves and they're being criticized constantly. And the boys have nudes of them that they're
Right.
threatening to share with the entire school if
Right.
they don't do X, Y, and Z. On the other hand, what boys have done is they have kind of escaped from the real world into gaming, porn, and then at some point gambling, sports gambling.
Right.
And so we have this reality where, in the 70s, 60% or something like that of college students were male. In the 80s, it was 50-50. Today, on average, it's 60% of college students are female. In a lot of Christian colleges, I don't know why this is the case. I was looking at this last week. 70% of the students are female.
Oh, wow.
Guys
I did not know that.
Guys are not launching into the world because they are just finding this kind of isolated existence. And it's having these different effects on male and female.
Yeah. So I was a student pastor for 10 years.
Yeah.
And in the time I was a student pastor, the smartphone launched, the app store launched, social media launched, and so this is all experimental, and I'm watching kids experiment with it. And I've always said that the hardest thing in the world to be is a middle school girl.
Yes.
The
Yes.
pressures of being a middle school girl, and then it's high school girl, and then it's college age girl, and then it's
Yeah.
it's just the world is coming at them so hard.
Right.
And I remember this was early on with social media. Instagram was almost brand new. They were doing this thing where they would take an Instagram post and they would put girls in it in 9 blocks.
Mm.
And then they would take votes and vote on like which one was the prettiest or whatever. And they'd put an X over a girl one at a time till there was one left. And I
Wow.
remember like, man, how cruel
And these were your students.
is that? It was
Sometimes.
going on within,
Okay.
it was going on within the middle school
Yeah.
there, and I remember it hurting one of our middle school students. She was popular. She was a cheerleader, and it wasn't something that she did. Somebody else put her up
Yes.
on that. Well, I mean, that's just evolved from that sort of thing. When we were teenagers, you would be at school and then you would go home. And once you got off the bus, did you ride the bus?
Until my sister started school,
okay.
and then mom took us to school
because the sister, because of the baby. That's nice. I rode the bus, but when I got off the bus, or when a peer got off the bus, you were home, you were with your friends, you were with your neighbors, your siblings, and the world did not have 24-hour access to you. If they wanted to get a hold of you, they could call you, but your dad would have to answer. Like the landline.
Right.
And now there's no getting away. There's no reprieve. So if there's a girl who's getting picked on,
yes,
she's getting picked on 24/7.
Yeah.
And literally she can go to bed at night and wake up the next morning canceled.
Yeah.
Having something incredibly mean said about her.
Or not even go to sleep. And this is an issue
It's a
too.
huge issue.
Staying up all night, interacting and
On the
monitoring
phone.
this. And then, how's that affecting their mental health, their academic performance, and all of these things? Because parents just have no boundaries at all.
Right. It's been a big thing this year because in the public school, kids have been able to have phones the past several years. And, they're sitting in class with their phone. They're not learning. They're on their phone. Now, a lot of schools this past year have banned phones. And, I've got kids in two different schools. One of the schools has never allowed phones. It's very strict. The other one allowed it. This year they disallowed it. They took it away. Parents were actually the people who said, well, I can't get a hold of my kid all day, every day now.
Yeah.
Well, you probably shouldn't be able to get a hold of your kid all day, every day. Shouldn't be texting your kid throughout the day. They're there to learn.
Yeah.
So
the thing I heard as a criticism was, well, what if there's a school shooting? I want my kid to have for safety's sake. Well, if there's a school shooting, you don't want your kid down here texting you.
Right, that's right.
Like, let the adults handle that and don't give them the extra distraction.
Right. Yeah. So they're just kind of going back to the issue of what has happened is now their peers can have access to them all the time. There's a comparison factor that happens. You're constantly comparing your life to somebody else's life. I remember another time being a student pastor. I might have mentioned this to you before, but we were working on something. I was working on this old bell tower in this church. We were fixing the bell.
Okay.
And I've climbed like way up in this bell tower. I'm fixing it. I've got this young man helping me. And he stays on the ground. He's great help. He's a great kid. But he's on the ground. And when we get done, the bell's fixed. He goes, hey, can I climb up there? And I was like, sure. And so he climbs way up this bell tower. He gets up there and goes, hey, take my picture. I want to post it on social media. And so I took his picture and he posted it. But the funny, you see what he did. It was like, he made himself look cool. Like I was up here fixing the bell tower. When in reality, he was standing on the floor passing me tools.
Yeah. Doing it for the gram.
Doing it for the gram. And there's this fact about social media that it is the best foot forward. It's not real life. But when that forming brain is looking and seeing, hey, that's all the things they're doing, it compares themselves to that, and it's constantly going to let you down.
Yeah.
You're constantly going to fall short. I saw a study one time, this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, that was saying that actually it's close. This was 2020. So that's 4 years ago.
Almost 5.
Almost 5. That young people who used social media, their happiness levels went down.
Yes.
While elderly people who use social media, their happiness went up.
Really?
Yeah. And here's why. Because grandma's at home getting to look at, playing Farmville back in the day, playing whatever.
Farmville,
getting locked out of her account and creating a new one or whatever that looks like. But she's able to look at her kids and her grandkids, and she's
connect
able
with old friends she hasn't seen in forever
before,
from the real world.
Right, from the real world.
Yes.
And is able to experience things, and it's not the opposite. It's not the other way around where you're not sitting there going, these are all the things that I'm not. So I think that's a huge piece of it. There's a bullying piece, there's a comparison piece, but there's also a level in which it rewires our brains.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so dopamine.
Yeah. And, that dopamine hit, and it's going to work for differently for guys and girls. I mean, mainly for girls, it's getting those likes, right? Putting that selfie up, hitting those likes, people saying, you look beautiful. That's giving them that dopamine that becomes an addiction. Whereas guys, they're finding that mostly through porn, right? And they're not there simply because of sex. They're there because it becomes a dopamine addiction.
Right.
That makes them feel better about themselves and their life. Yeah.
Right. I have struggled over the years a lot with a cell phone because for me, it's an escape. When I'm doing work and I hit something hard, it's easier for me to pull out my phone and open up Facebook and look at, Marketplace, which is what I do. I buy and sell stuff on Marketplace or to get on Instagram and scroll reels and I'm like, what am I doing? I got to be working here.
Yeah.
And you get that dopamine hit.
Right.
And you get that piece that satisfies your brain for a second. I have found a few things help me in this. I've got a device called a brick.
Yeah.
Where I can lock down my phone and basically make it a dumb phone, which is kind of helpful. And then just like separating myself from my phone.
Right.
Which is the best thing. Not having the phone on me.
Right.
I think is very helpful.
Yeah. Limiting notifications, just
Absolutely.
allowing the only necessary things to notify you. And then honestly, just really doing a kind of evaluation. What social media actually adds any value whatsoever to my life? I was on Facebook and Instagram until about 8 months ago, and I got off of it, and I have not missed it one bit. I'm still on Twitter. I connect with a lot of people there that I like to connect with, but I have not missed those other platforms at all.
Yeah. I think that's helpful. Now, when it comes to kids, and we're going to talk a lot about kids, let's get back to that. You have to ask some questions. Do you let your kids have a smartphone, and when to get it?
Yes.
And man, there's not any right answer here. And again, if you already have given your kid a smartphone, I'm not trying to make you feel bad at this point, but really, this is more of a word for maybe those who haven't done it yet or are considering it.
Yes.
Our strategy has been to hold off as long as possible. How long can we wait? I have a son, 15 and a half, one about to turn 13.
Right.
Neither one of them have a smartphone. Neither one of them have any social media. We have a house phone that is an iPhone because we don't have a landline, but that we can call up the house phone. That way we can get back in touch with them. But we have it locked down in such a way that it's essentially a dumb phone.
Right.
Right. They can't Google anything on it. It's no social media apps, none of that stuff on it. It's a dumb phone. If we send them somewhere else, they're at the park playing basketball or they're going over to a friend's house, we will allow them to take it. But there isn't John Owen had a girl asked for James's phone number the other day. Give me your brother's phone number. And he's like, he doesn't have one. You can text my mom.
Right.
If you want to get a hold of James, you can text my mom or my dad.
Yes.
And that's how they have to do it. And so, we'll come up to John Owen turning 16 next year. And then we'll have to wisely make the decision of what kind of phone do we get him.
Right.
And I can tell you this, whether it's a actual smartphone or it's like a flip phone, it will be a dumb phone.
Yeah.
I will lock it down in such a way that he can do very, very little on it.
Right. Yeah, but I would just warn parents that most of the native screen time and ways of locking phones down on Androids and iPhones are easily hackable by your kids.
Right.
And they share with one another how to do these things. So, in our household, we use Bark phones. So they're Android phones, but they have the Bark software on them that we can, from our phone with our app, allow and disallow certain things. And then it also monitors everything that's going on. So if there's like some sort of sexual thing that the AI picks up on, it will send an alert to Stacy and I's phone, and we can see the conversation our kids are having.
Okay.
And we also have a device, a Bark device that connects to our router here at home that we can control every device in this house.
That's awesome.
Including our TV, our smart TV. We lock it down at certain periods of time in the day. It has no internet access. We can lock out YouTube. We can lock out certain apps with the Bark device.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And you know, I've long used and had accountability partners with guys with covenant eyes and that kind of thing. I think those things are helpful, but it's not necessarily practical for a kid.
Right.
And especially when you're talking about now other devices, whether it be an iPad or that kind of thing.
Yeah, because Covenant Eyes will only is only able to monitor certain apps, mainly Safari on an iPhone.
Right.
So things that are happening in Instagram,
right? It's not doing anything with.
Yeah.
Right. So that it definitely can fall short. And again, kids figure out a way. And if kid can just download things from the App Store, it's impossible to keep up with.
Right. Yep.
So, you know, that's like one of the things with the phone that we have. Like they don't have a password to get to the App Store. They can't. You know, there's not much they can do with the phone because we have the access. They don't. But again, whenever the time is ready, and I mean, you guys would have been earlier than us.
Yeah, and honestly, I think we did it too early. We were overseas at the time, and we kind of used the logic that we wanted them to keep in touch with friends in America. If I could go back, I would have waited a lot later than I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to, as a parent, you're going to regret waiting.
Yeah.
The thing that makes it hard is that it's the thing that your kid wants.
Right.
And they're going to ask.
Right.
And they're going to ask, and they're going to ask, and they're going to push.
And you just have to be the parent, right?
Right.
You do not be afraid for your kids to be mad at you.
Right.
You're not doing this for some sort of Google customer review. So the customer does not get to determine if you are parenting them correctly.
Right. That's right. Yeah, I think, you know, you hear the line, well, everybody else is doing it. Why can't I do it? And I think as adults, what we know is like, if everybody else is doing it, it might be a really good reason not to do it. Like that's not great logic. And so, you know, I was at a basketball game yesterday. I looked over, I see all these middle schoolers on their phone. And I can only imagine the type of stuff. Actually, I can more than imagine. I know the type of stuff that's getting passed around. I look over beyond that and I see elementary school kids with their phones. And I'm going, that is setting that kid up for depression and anxiety, for porn addiction. You know, it's at this point, it would be like the illustration that you made of, hey, let's let our kids continue to smoke cigarettes.
Right. Yeah. And that just is a visual example of what Haidt talks about. He says, you know, we grew up with a play-based childhood. Kids today are growing up with a phone-based childhood. When you are allowed to have free play, that develops everything you need for adulthood. Yeah. Just to get, you know, if those elementary kids had been running around one end of the gym and inventing some sort of game and practicing leadership and getting into fights and having conflict resolution and all those things, then they would be preparing themselves for adulthood. Instead, they're doing this and they're not developing the way that we're normally supposed to develop.
Right. And so the question becomes, is there a way to course correct? And how do we course correct? I'll tell you one thing I've noticed with college students. And you know, at this point in our church, we've had over 100 college students come through. a lot of the older college students end up abandoning social media.
Yes.
And they this was before, like I'm going back several years, even going back before we had a lot of this data that we now know, like, hey, it's bad. They realized what it was doing to them and they abandon it. Yeah. Plenty of others don't. Plenty of others still, they have like their 1,000,000-day snap streak and not, but there has to be a way, a place in time to where we go, if this isn't healthy for us, we're willing to walk away. If this isn't healthy for our kids, we're willing to put it down. Like,
right.
For the parents out there who are in our church who are listening, who are these questions will come to you a couple of years down the road. You're not having to answer these questions yet. Go ahead and make it up in your mind now.
Right, right. Yeah, and I would think of it in this way: if at all possible, simulate for your kids your own childhood. Right? We did not have smartphones when we were kids. I got my first phone, which was a Motorola, when I was 16 and I started driving.
Yeah.
And then we did not have social media until it was invented.
Right.
I remember being our freshman year at college.
2004.
Yeah, 2004, visiting a friend of mine who went to U of L, University of Louisville, and she said, we have this new thing called the Facebook.
Yep, 100%.
And I was like, what are you talking about? We have a book that had everyone's faces and their dorm rooms and numbers in it. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
no. And so if you can, like for us, and like you're talking about with older people, social media can be, and we mess up enough, but it can be an addition to your real life.
Right. It can be used for networking. I mean, there's plenty. It can be a tool that is used for good.
Yeah.
But
you have to allow your kids to establish a real life in the real world first.
Yeah. And
then choose how they're going to operate in the digital world.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
For the wilderness.
For the wilderness. Let them establish their own life first and protect it and guard it. Again, just with a pastoral heart, our parents who have given their kids phones, this is not coming down and condemning you. I don't want you to sit there and feel bad about yourself, but I do want you to think, all right, how has this positively or negatively impacted my kid? And are there any course corrections that we need to take?
Yes. Yeah.
And if your kid gets mad at you, you can blame it on me. You can just say, well, Pastor Zach said, go take it up with him.
Yeah.
And I'd love to have that conversation with your kid.
I'm going to use that too. So Pastor Zach said,
go for it. I would love to have that conversation with your kid.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, as we close today, what are parting words of wisdom that you would give?
One thing just to add to everything, I mean, this whole thing has been wisdom, right?
Yep.
But one thing to add is the example that we set.
Ooh, come on.
Is going to create the expectations in our kids. So, kids are going to say, well, you don't put your phone down and you're always on Facebook. And if that's the case, guess what? They're right. Look in the mirror and prepare yourself to enforce what you want them to emulate.
Yeah. There's certain things that I like you do as a kid that you don't do because your parents did it. I think that would be my kids. My John Owen people are like, I don't want social media because dad's on it too much. Right.
Well, that's why they're not on Facebook anymore. They have to create all the new apps.
All the
Facebook's
other,
for old people.
Well, all the other things. But man, here's what I would just say as a parent. And that is you can't be too prudent in guarding your kids. And, back just ending on a serious note, crazy things happen that ruin kids' lives with sending out nudes, predators, human trafficking. I know that sounds crazy, but like human trafficking happens on apps, that happens on smartphones.
They are waiting there and looking for your kids.
So just be prudent.
Yes.
Just be careful. Be wise. If you give them a phone, treat it like a gun.
Yes.
and it's loaded all the time with great safety and security.
Yes.
Practice digital safety the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is probably a conversation will need to happen again.
Yes.
And we want to do, as pastors of Overland Church, we want to help our people walk with incredible wisdom in this world that we live in. It's wild out there. God bless.